Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Graves, back with you for the final lesson videos for SE301. Today we are covering the last two tasks in the solution implementation phase of the SDP. You recall that the first task in this phase was planning for action. The second task is execution, and the third task is monitoring and control. Here's where we are in the course. Tomorrow you have your project presentations, and then we'll wrap things up with the final opportunity for you to excel on Friday with the term end exam. After today's lesson, you should be able to describe the monitor, assess, control cycle, understand the concept of earned value, and understand how Microsoft Project can enhance the management of an engineering project. Once the plan for implementation is complete, we begin the execution task and begin to carry out the plan. But as the saying goes, no plan survives first contact, so we need to have a way of ensuring the project stays on track with regard to the goals of cost, schedule, and performance. The monitor, assess, control process helps the project manager to see where we are, where we want to be, and whether we need to make adjustments. The idea behind this process is that since we have a project plan, at a given time we're able to identify where we expect the project to be in terms of cost, schedule, and performance. So we monitor aspects of the project so that we can compare reality with our expectation. We identify what to monitor ahead of time, what data we'll need, and how we'll collect it. Then we collect that data throughout the course of the project, and we record and report it. When the data is reported, it needs to be assessed to see if we're on track or not. Are we on schedule? Will we break our budget? Is quality up to the standards we've set? There are several methods to assess how the project is going. We'll talk in more depth about one of them, earned value, shortly. In the assess stage, if we determine that the project is off track, then we have to determine what to do in order to bring it back in line with expectations. That's the control stage. We may need to commit additional manpower or budgetary resources, or we may need to adjust how we're performing certain tasks. The goal is to bring the project's progress closer to where it needs to be for successful completion within time and budget constraints. If the project is determined to be on track in the assess stage, we simply go back to the monitor stage and continue on. You might notice that these three stages are similar to the three risk management activities. Monitor is similar to identify, assess is the same in both, and control is similar to mitigate. I mentioned that we would look closer at the earned value management technique for assessing projects, so let's do that. Earned value management gives us an objective way to measure project performance and to compare actual progress to planned progress. The measure of progress is called earned value, and it is simply the product of the percentage of the project that's been completed at a specific time multiplied by the total planned cost for the project. One thing to notice in this technique is that value here is measured in dollars. This is different than the idea of value that we've been using throughout the SDP to indicate the performance of a system. So at some time during the execution of the project, we'll determine the earned value of the project at that time as a measure of progress. We'll compare that to the actual cost of work that's taken place up to that point in time. Using our project plan, we can also determine the planned value, which is the cost of the work that we had planned to have done by that point in time. Using these amounts, we'll be able to determine variances that show how far off of our plan we are in terms of value. We can also determine how far off we are in terms of schedule. Again, using our project plan, we can find out when we expect it to be as far along as we are now. This is the time scheduled for the work performed. We compare this with the actual time that it took to perform that work. Regarding cost, the budget at completion, or BAC, is the total budget for the project. Using what we've spent so far and how far we've progressed on the project, we will compute the estimated cost to complete the project from this point forward. Then we can add that to what we've spent so far to get what the estimated cost at completion. and we can compare that to the budget to see if we expect to be over or under budget. All of the quantities just described are tied together in this figure. This plot shows time on the horizontal axis and value in dollars on the vertical axis. This solid line shows the planned progress of value over time. It starts at 0 and goes up to the budget at completion. Below that line, we see the value completed in the project over the first month. And you can see that pretty much from the start, things have not gone as well as we planned. Additionally, above the planned value line, we see the curve showing how much we've spent, the actual cost. Again, we've been spending more than planned. So at the 1 month point, we can see the levels of actual cost, planned value, and earned value. The spending variance, or cost variance, is the difference between the actual cost and earned value. And the schedule variance is the difference between planned value and earned value. Both of these variances are in terms of value, and so are dollar amounts. The difference between actual time and time scheduled is called the time variance. Based on the trajectory of the actual cost curve, we can see the estimated cost at completion, the total cost of the project if we continue along this path. The difference between that estimate and what we've spent so far, the actual cost, is the estimated cost to complete the project. That is, how much we will need to spend after today in order to finish. Here's the same figure along with how we calculate the values for the different comparisons. You see the variances I mentioned, the cost, schedule, and time variance. For any of these variances, a positive number indicates good performance, while a negative number indicates bad performance. For example, if my earned value was more than my actual cost, my cost variance would be positive, indicating that I was actually running under budget. You'll notice two indices here, the Cost Performance Index and the Schedule Performance Index. These indices are measures of efficiency and performance. Looking at the CPI, the Cost Performance Index, we can see that an index of 1 means that the project is exactly on budget because earned value and actual cost are equal. If the index is below 1, we're getting less than $1 worth of value for each dollar we've spent. If it's more than 1, we're getting more than $1 value for each dollar we spent. So greater than 1 is better for this index. Finally, we show how we estimate remaining costs for the project. Recall that the BAC is the planned cost for the entire project. To determine the estimated cost to complete the ETC, we first subtract the earned value from the BAC. This difference represents the total work left to be done on the project. We divide that remaining work by the CPI because the CPI represents how much value we've gotten per dollar spent so far. So the ETC tells how much more we'll need to spend to get the remaining value needed if we continue to spend like we have been. Then we add the ETC to how much we've already spent, the actual cost or AC, to get the estimated cost at completion or EAC. If we compare the EAC to the BAC, we can tell if we expect to be over or under budget, and based on that, we can take action if we need to. Still not convinced? Let's look at a simple example to illustrate how this technique works. Suppose you're managing a project to install 100 miles of pipeline. You anticipate a cost of $10,000 per mile, and according to your project plan, you can install 10 miles per week. So your budget at completion is $1 million, and you plan to be finished in 10 weeks. Now suppose you're 7 weeks in and you've already finished 80 miles of pipeline. You've also spent $850,000. What's your earned value at this point? To find earned value, we take our percentage complete and multiply by the planned cost. So you're 80% done, 80 out of 100 miles that is, and you multiply that by your total budget of $1 million. So the earned value at the end of week 7 is $800,000. The planned value is where you expect it to be according to your plan. You expected to finish 10 miles a week, so at the end of week 7, your plan said you'd have 70 miles done, which gives a planned value of $700,000. And your actual cost is how much you spent, which is $850,000. You can now see how you're doing according to budget by finding the cost variance. $800,000 minus $850,000 gives you a cost variance of negative $50,000. So you've created $50,000 less value than you spent. So in terms of cost, you're over budget. But what about schedule? You produced $800,000 in value in the amount of time you expected to produce $700,000. So your schedule variance is a positive $100,000. So you're ahead of schedule. Now you want to project forward to the end of the project. How much will it cost to finish based on where you are now? First, we need to determine the cost performance index to see how efficient you've been with your spending so far. By dividing the earned value by the actual cost, we can see that you're generating 94 cents of value for each dollar you spend. To find the estimated cost to complete, you see that there is $200,000 of value left to generate. And you do this by subtracting 1 million minus the earned value of 800,000. Then divide that by the CPI to find that you expect to spend $212,500 more in order to complete the final 20 miles. By adding this to the actual cost of $850,000, you see that the estimated cost at completion is $1,062,500. So this tells you that you anticipate going over budget by $62,500. So what do you need to do? You either need to come up with additional financial resources for the project, or perhaps you can change how you're operating and work more slowly in an effort to reduce costs since you're ahead of schedule. This has been an introduction to earned value management, and there's actually a lot more to it. This is the Earned Value Management Gold Card, a reference from the Defense Acquisition University for program managers to use when measuring progress of contracts for the government. Earned value management is actually required for contracts over $20 million. And so this is a real-world example of the application of what we've just shown you. This concludes the first video for today's lesson. In the next video, we'll introduce you to Microsoft Project, a tool that's available to you and is widely used for project planning and monitoring.